Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
What's your opinion on Area 51? Do they actually have UFOs and aliens in there?
I've got a friend that goes back 20-some-odd years with me. Back to high school, old man here. He's always been one of those types who is always way too smart for some of us to keep up with. You know how highly intelligent people are, just kind of weird, dry sense of humor types. Anyway, this dude is a good guy nonetheless. Well, after high school, he joined the United States Air Force. Because of his intellect and testing, he ended up doing something along the lines of nuclear testing as his MOS, military occupational specialty. He retired shortly after the Fukushima incident. He and his team were sent to the West Coast to test the air for an extended period to monitor radiation levels as they came across the Pacific, just to give you an idea. So anyway, the dude had and still has some clearance. Last year, his band played a show, and they covered an entire Tool album. Did a killer job too, I may add. Needless to say, we got pretty tanked and ended up drinking and talking until almost dawn. Being me, I jumped right into conspiracies and aliens and reptoids, etc. He told me that he had been to Area 51 for part of his training. That caught me by total surprise, so I started digging. Being pragmatic, he assured me that there was nothing there, and that's how our conversation ended. We moved on to breakfast, but I remember feeling like he was kinda stonewalling me, like the way he said it, almost from a script of what to tell civilians. Fast forward a couple of days, it is now Monday. I cut some firewood all day and I was dead tired. I'm chilling, still in my boots and everything, laying on my bed. I heard my roommate say from the other room that so-and-so was here. The dude walks straight into my room. Doesn't say hi. How you doing? Fuck you. Nothing of the sort. He just says, hey, remember the other night? What we talked about? I hadn't even sat up. It was weird. He says to me, well, when you descend the lower levels at S4, it's huge and round. The first couple of levels you walk is in a large circle that descends like a theater would. Those first levels are security. Then in this circular pattern are complete, intact buildings from Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Buildings from the blast zone that for some reason did not receive a scratch. They were uprooted, encased in glass, crated, and shipped here from Japan. They sit side by side in the secret spiral underground base in the middle of a salt flat in the desert of the US. Like a strange and eerie neighborhood with no one home. Actually, some had human bodies in them that perished where they sat. He told me everything was airtight, and the people didn't decompose much past the immediate aftermath of their demise. He told me this with a straight face in a matter-of-fact way, like he was sent there to do this specifically. Then, as quickly as he showed up, he just walked out. Before he was out of my eyesight down the hall, I'm still laying there with a spliff hanging from my lips in total awe. He turned and says, S4, Groom Lake, Area 51, whatever it goes by, is for testing new aircraft and for testing radiation that we've done to others as well as ourselves out there. The real secret is Dugway. I haven't talked to him since. His wife tried to have an affair with me because I guess he wasn't paying her enough attention. When I respectfully declined, she told him I instigated an attempt on her. I guess to garner his attention. Long-winded, I know. Wish it were more revealing, but it is true.
I am a long-time occultist and astral projector, more specifically practiced in out-of-body experiences in general of many kinds. I am here to share some insights about Area 51. I usually don't make posts like this, but I'm extremely bored of life. Perhaps this will conjure up some of those spooky, fake gang-stalking experiences in my life. Area 51 is an extremely sectioned place with different levels of officials populating each section. The primary guards that watch the gates, for example, know relatively nothing that the officials working in the innermost sections do. This is successfully done quite easily, and anyone who has worked in the military or government before will understand this. You are assigned a post. You are told what you need to know for that post. It is not a free-roam adventure. This is what makes it possible for the thousands of surface guards and agents that only worked there temporarily to never leak a dangerous secret. it is because they do not know them. Plain and simple. Also, the officials working in the deepest sections of the base do not have a typical external life, if at all. These are, of course, the necessary precautions to keep the info away from the public. What you know the world as and what a top 100 highest cleared official knows the world as are so incredibly different, the latter would sound like science fiction and horror. Anyhow, to the meat of the matter. The sauciest sections of the base lay underground. There are several isolated sections within the underground part of the base as well that don't work together at all. For example, there are technological centers, there are biological containment centers, potentially world or crop-ending plagues, extraterrestrial, cryptid, and MISC centers. The first thing I noticed while remote viewing were some gravitational field generators and similar machines due to the fact they pulled my consciousness to them like a moth to a lamp. A black sphere, radiating a dark purple field. There's a type of head-worn apparatus there that sparks a blue energy off the inner sides where the temples would connect. Energetically connecting to this machine feels like a perfect combination of sleep, high cognition, and ecstasy. I see these, in glass tanks in rows along a hallway. Inside these tanks, filled with fluid, are humanoid beings. They are incredibly pale. I feel that they have never lived an awake life, instead kept in this highly cognizant, highly euphoric coma-like state their entire adult life at least. They were perhaps born or grown in the facility to be used in these machines, which after connecting to the people inside them seem to be for computing. This may sound ludicrous to the layman, but you should know that the human soul is an expression of quantum force. Your life force is the core of quantum computing, and these people in these tanks are quantum computing puppets of their real selves. At least, I can say honestly, that they are both ignorant of this and experiencing a prolonged state of ecstasy. Apart from what I've mentioned so far, the most shocking thing, the absolutely most sickening, cannibalistic thing I've ever seen, are the real-life men in black. In other words, golems. They are in between cyborgs and mind-controlled men. Essentially, and brace yourself, their souls, or others' souls, are placed in a machine with a strong energy field emanating from the center. The souls of a donut-shaped tube around the center where they spin indefinitely. This machine is placed in the skulls of these golems, in the center brain. This is like a captured soul, and provides for the MIB the reality processing levels of a human without any emotions or will of their own. This is an abomination to any god in any religion. This is divine cannibalism. Their entire operation is. I quite literally feel a brick in my lower gut and cold chills in my body recalling this. This is an atrocity to God's delicates and the essence of human beings and free will.
Excerpt. Area 51. An Uncensored History of America's Top Secret Military Base by Annie Jacobson. Prologue. The Secret City. This book is a work of nonfiction. The stories I tell in this narrative are real. None of the people are invented. Of the 74 individuals interviewed for this book with rare first-hand knowledge of the secret base, 32 of them lived and worked at Area 51. Area 51 is the nation's most secret domestic military facility. It is located in the high desert of southern Nevada, 75 miles north of Las Vegas. Its facilities have been constructed over the past 60 years around a flat, dry lake bed called Groom Lake. The U.S. government has never admitted it exists. Key to understanding Area 51 is knowing that it sits inside the largest government-controlled land parcel in the United States, the Nevada Test and Training Range. Encompassing 4,687 square miles, this area is just a little smaller than the state of Connecticut, 3 times the size of Rhode Island, and more than twice as big as Delaware. Set inside this enormous expanse is a smaller parcel of land, 1,350 square miles, called the Nevada Test Site, the only facility like it in the continental United States. Beginning in 1951, on the orders of President Harry Truman, 105 nuclear weapons were exploded above ground at the site, and another 828 were exploded underground in tunnel chambers and deep vertical shafts. The last nuclear weapons test on American soil occurred at the Nevada test site on September 23, 1992. The facility contains the largest amount of weapons-grade plutonium and uranium in the United States, not secured inside a nuclear laboratory. Area 51 sits just outside the Nevada test site, approximately 5 miles to the northeast of the northernmost corner, which places it inside the Nevada test and training range. Because everything that goes on at Area 51, and most of what goes on at the Nevada test and training range, is classified when it is happening. This is a book about secrets. 2 early projects at Groom Lake have been declassified by the Central Intelligence Agency: the U-2 spy plane, declassified in 1998, and the A-12 Oxcart spy plane, declassified in 2007. And yet in thousands of pages of declassified memos and reports, the name Area 51 is always redacted or blacked out. There are only 2 known exceptions, most likely mistakes. This is a book about government projects and operations that have been hidden for decades, some for good reasons, others for arguably terrible ones, and one that should never have happened at all. These operations took place in the name of national security, and they all involved cutting-edge science. The last published words of Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb, were, "Science is not everything, but science is very beautiful." After reading this book, readers can decide what they think about what Oppenheimer said. This is a book about black operations, government projects that are secret from Congress and secret from the people who make up the United States. To understand how black projects began and how they continue to function today, one must start with the creation of the atomic bomb. The men who ran the Manhattan Project wrote the rules about black operations. The atomic bomb was the mother of all black projects, and it is the parent from which all black operations have sprung. Building the bomb was the single most expensive engineering project in the history of the United States. It began in 1942, and by the time the bomb was tested, inside the White Sands Proving Ground in the New Mexico high desert, on July 16, 1945, the bomb's price tag, adjusted for inflation, was $28 billion. The degree of secrecy maintained while building the bomb is almost inconceivable. When the world learned that America had dropped an atomic weapon on Hiroshima, no one was more surprised than the U.S. Congress, none of whose members had had any idea it was being developed. Vice President Harry Truman had been equally stunned to learn about the bomb when he became President of the United States on April 12, 1945. Truman had been the chairman of the Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program when he was vice president, meaning he was in charge of watching how money was spent during the war. Yet he'd had no idea about the atomic bomb until he became president, and the information was relayed to him by 2 men, Vannevar Bush, the president's science advisor, and Henry L. Stimson, the nation's Secretary of War. Bush was in charge of the Manhattan Project, and Stimson was in charge of the war. The Manhattan Project employed 200,000 people. It had 80 offices and dozens of production plants spread out all over the country, including a 60,000-acre facility in rural Tennessee that pulled more power off the nation's electrical grid than New York City did on any given night. And no one knew the Manhattan Project was there. That is how powerful a black operation can be. After the war ended, Congress, the legislators who had been so easily kept in the dark for 2.5 years, was given stewardship of the bomb. It was now up to Congress to decide who would control its unimaginable destructive power. With the passing of the Atomic Energy Act of 1946, a terrifying and unprecedented new system of secret-keeping emerged. The presidential system was governed by presidential executive orders regarding national security information. But the newly created Atomic Energy Commission, formerly known as the Manhattan Project, was now in charge of regulating the classification of all nuclear weapons information in a system that was totally separate from the president's system. In other words, for the first time in American history, a federal agency run by civilians, the Atomic Energy Commission, would maintain a body of secrets classified based on factors other than presidential executive orders. It is from the Atomic Energy Act of 1946 that the concept "born classified" came to be, and it was the Atomic Energy Commission that would oversee the building of 70,000 nuclear bombs in 65 different sizes and styles. Atomic energy was the first entity to control Area 51, a fact previously undisclosed, and it did so with terrifying and unprecedented power. One simply cannot consider Area 51 uncensored history without addressing this cold, hard, and ultimately devastating truth. The Atomic Energy Commission's restricted data classification was an even more terrifying anomaly, something that could originate outside the government through the thinking and research of private parties. In other words, the Atomic Energy Commission could hire a private company to conduct research for the commission, knowing that the company's thinking and research would be born classified, and that even the President of the United States would not necessarily have a need to know about it. In 1994, for instance, when President Clinton created by executive order the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to look into secrets kept by the Atomic Energy Commission, certain records involving certain programs inside and around Area 51 were kept from the President on the grounds that he did not have a need to know. 2 of these programs, still classified, are revealed publicly for the first time in this book. One of the Atomic Energy Commission's former classifications officers, Donald Woodbridge, characterized the term born classified as something that gives the professional classificationist unanswerable authority. Area 51 lives on as an example. Of the Atomic Energy Commission's many facilities across the nation, it is now called the Department of Energy. The single largest facility is, and always has been, the Nevada Test Site. Other parts of the Nevada Test and Training Range would be controlled by the Department of Defense, but there were gray areas like Area 51, craggy mountain ranges and flat, dry lake beds sitting just outside the official borders of the Nevada Test Site and not controlled by the Department of Defense. These areas are where the most secret projects were set up. No one had a need to know about them. And for decades, until this book was published, no one would. From the interview, probably what I should have posted first. Interview highlights. The secrecy surrounding Area 51 has made it fertile ground for conspiracy theories, including one about a UFO cover-up, and another about the moon landing having never happened. Jacobson addresses these conspiracy theories in the book and speculates about what led to them. She says her book is based on interviews with 74 individuals with rare first-hand knowledge of the secret base. 32 of the people she interviewed lived and worked at Area 51, on flying discs and conspiracy theories. The UFO craze began in the summer of 1947. Several months later, the G2 intelligence, which was the Army Intelligence Corps at the time, spent an enormous amount of time and treasure seeking out 2 former Third Reich aerospace designers named Walter and Reimar Horton, who had allegedly created a flying disc. American intelligence agents fanned out across Europe seeking the Horton brothers to find out if, in fact, they had made this flying disc. The idea behind it remains. Why? Why were they looking for a flying disc? And conspiracy theorists have had their hands on this declassified file for over a decade now, and they say it proves that this flying disc came from outer space. If you read the documents, the takeaway that I found fascinating was that at the end of it, the Army admits finding the Horton brothers, and that the Horton brothers admitted their contact with the Russians, and that's where the file ends. Everything after that is classified. On why Area 51 is actually classified, according to a source. The Horton brothers were involved in the flying disc crash in New Mexico, and that is from a single source. There was an unusual moment where that source became very upset and told me things that were stunning that's almost impossible to believe at first read. And that is that a flying disc really did crash in New Mexico, and it was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then in 1951, it was transferred to Area 51, which is why the base is called Area 51. And the stunning part of the reveal is that my source, who I absolutely believe and worked with for 18 months on this, was one of the engineers who received the equipment, and he also received the people who were in the craft. The people were, according to the source, were child-sized pilots, and there's a lot of debate about how old they were. He believes they were 13, although other people believe they may have been older. But this is a first-hand witness to this, and I made a decision to write about this in the very end of the book. After I take the traditional journalist form of telling you everything in the third person, I switch and I kind of lean into the reader and I say, Look, this is not why Area 51 is classified to the point where no one in the government will admit it exists. The reason is because of what one man told me. And then using the first person, I tell you what I was told. And there's no doubt that people are going to be upset, alarmed, and skeptical of this information, but I absolutely believe the veracity of my source. And I believe it was important that I put this information out there because it is the tip of a very big iceberg. On the Soviet human experiments her source told her about, the child-sized aviators in this craft that crashed in New Mexico were the result of a Soviet human experimentation program, and they had been made to look like aliens, a la Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, and it was a warning shot over President Truman's bow, so to speak. In 1947, when this would have originally happened, the Soviets did not yet have the nuclear bomb, and Stalin and Truman were locked in horns with one another, and Stalin couldn't compete in nuclear weaponry yet, but he certainly could compete in the world of black propaganda, and that was his aim, according to my source. What is first-hand information is that he worked with these bodies of the pilots, and he was an eyewitness to the horror of seeing them and working with them. Where they actually came from is obviously the subject of debate. But if you look at the timeline with Josef Mengele, he disappeared for a while, and the suggestion by the source is that Mengele had already cut his losses at that point and was working with Stalin on why the Soviets would have undertaken such a hoax. The plan, according to my source, was to create panic in the United States with this belief that a UFO had landed with aliens inside of it. And one of the most interesting documents is the second CIA director, Walter Bedell Smith, memos back and forth to the National Security Council talking about how the fear is that the Soviets could make a hoax against America involving a UFO and overload our early air defense warning system, making America vulnerable to an attack.
I would like to remain anonymous as what I'm about to share is highly confidential and classified. I would get into serious trouble from sharing this information, and I'm breaking the oath I swore when I commenced working in Area 51. The reason I'm sharing this is because I have found groundbreaking information relating to the cover-up of extraterrestrial contact. Extraterrestrial contact was first made in Egypt during the Egyptian era. The pyramids are not only tombs, but were built as a worship ceremonial ground to the gods above, the extraterrestrials who reside in the Orion constellation. The first UFO crash occurred in 1914 during World War I, when a UFO was accidentally shot down by British aircraft. The UFO then shot to the skies as reports clarify, but pieces of the aircraft were broken down in orbit. The pieces were recovered in 2002 by Area 51. The infamous Roswell crash also occurred, but fake leaked. Alien videos were made to distract the public and confirm it was a fake. The aliens recovered from the ship were dead, with only a few on the edge of death. They are all dead now, and their bodies reside in an underground facility with testing still being done. Area 51 has recovered over 200 UFOs and have successfully reverse-engineered over 100 of these objects. Many of them were not populated by extraterrestrials, but a few motherships contained a lifeless extraterrestrials. Area 51 and NASA have plans in action and weapons scavenged from UFOs to take down multiple motherships and many fleets in case of an alien invasion. Furthermore, since the last decade, most reports of strange extraterrestrial activity or contact have been quickly shut down or covered up. Many UFOs who were non-hostile and just orbiting around the skies were rapidly shot down and taken into hangars. However, some extraterrestrials have made negotiations with Area 51 and NASA to offer technology in return of volunteering human subjects. This has been occurring since 1947. NASA has seen many UFOs whilst on the moon, and they have been hostile. Many planets in our solar system, such as Saturn and Neptune, have extraterrestrials researching our solar system. They have been peaceful and have communicated with peace. When I was working at Area 51, I saw a mothership being taken into a hangar. When I questioned my officers and team, they threatened me and said it didn't concern me, and left. However, during 2014 and 2016, I saw glimpses of more UFOs and even extraterrestrials being taken into underground facilities. I was then told the truth. NASA and Area 51 have technology beyond our current capabilities, and some cigar-shaped UFOs are actually government-controlled tests to engage in wars. I have resigned my job, and everything I have learnt changed my perception of the world and the universe.
You can tell this is cancerous bullshit LARPing instantly the moment the NEAT treats Area 51 as some sort of independent entity or institution.
To be fair, Area 51 is a separate entity. It is part of the government and kind of part of the military, Air Force specifically, but it is separated from those entities in information and function. Most people that work there are biologically bugged. The bugs are always listening, and if they release info, they are shut down instantaneously. The ones who don't get bugged are given an enhanced form of the commandate Christian drug, forget-me-nots. They don't have little men in black memory eraser pens, but this drug will cause you to forget everything you witnessed while under the influence without significantly impeding cognitive function. As for the rest of the government, well, there are things there that not even the president is allowed to know of. The CIA has the majority of the involvement in the classified info and projects. Source: myself. Cannot disclose further information.
We investigated a UFO crash out in Roswell. We honestly did not know what the object was. We were later informed by our superiors that the wreckage was in fact a weather balloon. We felt dumber than dumb. We had to retract our story with the local newspaper folks. No Greys were transported to Area 51 and interviewed. During the Cold War era, we created Project Blue Book, but didn't find anything of interest at all or perceived any UFO claims to be a threat to national security, so we scrapped it. It was the worst job in the CIA to have to deal with at the time. During the late 1980s, there was a mystique about Area 51 that began burgeoning. Even though the Cold War came to an end in 1991, we decided to ride that mystique. Throughout the 1990s to this day even, we have agents spinning false stories to the media with corroborative evidence that we have UFOs in our possession and have back-engineered them. I won't mention any names because that's classified, but I can tell you that they are all hired to lie to make other countries believe that we do in fact have back-engineered, powerful UFO technology. Of course, we deny it because it makes other countries think we're hiding something superior to what they possess. In fact, we have created more alien-looking aircraft, some of which have been mistaken as otherworldly by the media.
I previously started a thread about me and a friend going to Area 51 this summer. I now return with the story. After grabbing a cup of coffee and talking to the locals in Rachel, we set up camp outside the back gate into Area 51. Apparently, the other gate had a better view, but it was still quite the show when the lights from the base illuminated the sky over the mountains. Most of our concentration initially went to fending off myriads of insects, which we made the mistake of awakening by placing tents on the seemingly untouched desert soil. The bastards even flew down into my beer. Finally, we were however able to focus on watching the skies in brought camping chairs. For about an hour we didn't see anything, then all of a sudden a bright white flash appeared above our heads, and within a second turned into a small white object moving across the sky. A couple of seconds later, another bright flash appeared, and another object followed the first one in the direction of the base. The flashes were about 8 times the size of the object which emerged, which in turn was about the size of a star. After flying in a seemingly straight trajectory, the objects disappeared completely from view after about a 7-second flight, and we didn't see anything else after this. The flash and the quick succession between them is the reason I personally don't simply dismiss the objects as being satellites. But what are your views /X/?
I'll take a poke at actually answering this neat question. Okay, there are several reasons that a walk-in would be extremely difficult and dangerous. The Groom Lake facility's zoning was recently changed. The federal government purchased another huge piece of land near one of the last remaining popular areas that actually overlooked the facility, and then blocked it off with fencing, signage, and surveillance. The closest you can actually get to the facility now is, I believe, something like 15 miles away. That's 15 miles of the Mojave Desert, with infrared cameras and motion sensors. Mounted surveillance patrols roll around the perimeter of the property regularly. These patrols are armed and are legally entitled to use lethal force to stop an intrusion, the same policy that all U.S. federal installations use under certain FPCON conditions. So say that a walk-in was actually mounted at one of the road entrances to the facility. The activity would be picked up on an infrared camera immediately, probably well before you even approach the "Do Not Enter" use of lethal force authorized signage. A mounted patrol would be dispatched to the walk-in within minutes. According to standard sentry procedures, the walkers would be warned using a series of non-lethal methods such as a megaphone, an acoustic active denial system, flashbangs or warning shots, according to the guard unit's specific spins for their force continuum. As a last possible resort, if the walk-in continued, the guard patrol would fire on the walkers. We're talking controlled, aimed shots on semi-auto. Being up against unarmed walkers, some of the guards might be moved into a shoot-to-wound posture, but I'm sure many of them would still be in the shoot-to-stop posture, which means that walkers would be taking 5.56mm rounds to the chest. A handful of walkers would be struck down in seconds. Thousands of walkers could press on, having absorbed the guards' ammunition. Which is where things get real interesting. What a lot of people forget or don't know is that there is an AH-64 Apache squadron stationed at the Groom Lake facility for just such an occasion. If a group of walkers were to actually manage to overcome the extreme terrain, approach the perimeter, survive the first several guard patrols, and whatever passive defensive measures that all of the major approaches to the facility are bound to have, many that we don't know about, and then proceed to cross the remaining 15 miles of desert towards the actual facility, the Apaches would be ordered to scramble, which takes about 8 minutes. They are armed with 20mm DU rounds, FLIR, Hydra rockets, and Hellfire missiles. One Apache could devastate thousands of walkers. And in the Mojave, you really wouldn't have very many places to hide from an Apache, much less 8 of them. So let's take this absurdity a bit further. Say you're Gordon Freeman and you just so happen to have a few SA-7s or Stingers or TOW missiles with you, so you shoot down the Apaches. Now the entire facility is on FPCON Delta. All guards are ordered to detain any and all personnel who are not badged appropriately and fire upon them should they flee or resist. After having defeated several more rounds of guard patrols on your 15-mile trek to the facility, the inner perimeter guards would begin to engage you effectively at about 600 yards. You have zero cover or concealment, so you're basically dodging bullets until you can effectively return fire. Let's say you do. You make it to the outermost security fence, which is now locked. At this point, fighters are being scrambled from Edwards, Nellis, and Tonopah ABFs since NORAD, DHS, and the FBI has probably been alerted by this point. You managed to defeat the probably 8 or so inner and outer perimeter guards armed with automatic weapons, and you have breached the security fencing. Congratulations. You have now walked into a fully locked down airbase facility. All exterior doors will probably be locked. Even if they aren't, you have no idea what is on the other side of them. Your only route guidance is what you could glean from satellite imagery. You can identify the hangars and the flight line, and that's about it. Everything else is very foreign to you, so you basically wander around protesting aimlessly, trying doors, just sort of generally snooping around when the Strike Eagles start sniper potting you for PID so that they can strafe you with their 20mm cannons. If you somehow manage to evade that and just so happen to find yourself in whatever is considered the main entrance to the main facility, good luck, because you're now on the top floor of a facility that probably extends at least 40 stories into the ground beneath you, and you've never been here before. Even further, I'm bored and this is fun to speculate about. Each level and probably certain areas of each level are controlled by area badges and security stations. Each station features a locked and vaulted door which may or may not be attended by an armed guard. You've caused a lot of noise at this point, so all of these doors are now closed and locked. Unless you brought a plasma torch with you, you won't be getting through them. So the interior of the facility will basically look like a whole lot of locked vaulted doors to you, with very little of interest in the actual corridors. Facilities such as this are usually built hierarchically based on security clearance levels. So all of the locked doors containing the lowest level secret and top secret stuff will be towards the surface. The higher the classification, the higher the compartmentalization. You will probably encounter armed interior security stations the deeper into the facility you go. Stations that are meant to prevent people who aren't read on to certain programs' access lists from viewing the material. This is to prevent there being one guy who knows everything about what goes on in the facility. So you strike out in the underground facility because everything cool is locked up. Let's pop back up to the surface and check out the hangars. The hangar bay doors have probably been closed by this point, but there are side pedestrian entrances. Plasma lance yourself into one of those and what do you see? Well, let's just take a wild guess here. You probably see experimental military aircraft, about which you know next to nothing unless you've been trained as a combat aviator. My guess is that they're probably unmanned and probably have some experimental propulsion units, composite materials, and design elements in them. My other guess is that it isn't a fighter. It's probably some sort of suborbital long-range reconnaissance aircraft. There are probably several slightly different models in there, which explains the entire purpose of the facility, to test them. With any luck, some of the maintainers were lazy and left some classified technical orders out for you to grab, but probably not. Honestly, not much else in here. And you aren't going to fly the things. Well, you might actually manage to take off if you have some pilot training and the checklists are actually in the aircraft, but who is going to take off into a swarm of F-15s directly overhead? Oh well. You might be able to take an elevator down to what is probably a full-fledged aircraft production and testing facility beneath the hangars. You could definitely scrounge up some secrets down there, provided you weren't killed 6 hours ago. Who knows? There might even be some UFO wreckage down there being reverse-engineered and experimented upon. But who wants to stare at top-secret blueprints and gutted spaceships all day? Let's go find some aliens. The Dulce facility is quite a ways away, and you're getting hounded by fighter bombers. Even if you made it there, it's way more locked doors and security checkpoints and airlocks and clean rooms than the main facility was. Oh well. And even if you do see an alien in there, alive or dead, So fucking what? The concept of aliens pervades culture. If you actually credibly saw one and then went to tell the world about it, you'd just be one more nutter out there babbling on about reptilians and greys and the fucking Illuminati and all that shit on YouTube. Nothing would change. Nothing. The federal government would kill you, spin everything, and attempt to declassify any classified information you may have actually revealed. It would mean nothing. But seriously, let's be realistic. You and 2,000 of your friends would have been deader than dead long ago. TLDR. There is a very good reason that people stay away from the facility. The closest you can actually get to the facility is about 15 miles away. If you attempt to get closer than that by force or non-compliance, you will be killed, or at least arrested, by men with guns and attack helicopters. And it will be your fault. So stay the fuck away from the facility. Very few people in this world would actually learn anything useful or productive or meaningful from having seen it anyway. Good question.
What's in Area 51? Not much anymore. They keep the speciousness for the publicity. Nothing says fresh Air Force recruits like an opportunity to get a peek at Area 51. To be honest, all the happenings in the 60s and 70s with Area 51 weren't even at Area 51, just what was supposedly recovered from aliens was taken there. I would take the belief that there was classified military tech being tested there. Nevada was a dumping ground for nukes a long time ago, also. There's a lot of waste stored all over the state in various blackout sites that give sign warnings but no real guards. You wouldn't want to step foot in those places, however, as like I said, they are weapon testing grounds and still may have active explosives under the dirt. What I would be more weird about is not shit that happened revolving around Area 51, as it just is the typical classified base, and those are everywhere. What I would consider weird was shit like MK Ultra, where they went around drugging people with LSD and looking for psychic fucks that could read minds or manipulate matter. The former of which is still ongoing, albeit turned into a scientific debacle.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.